make sure everything is set up so we have it going. Hey everybody, happy New Year. Happy New Year. Hope y'all are having a good Sunday. Hello everybody. Hello, hi Sweden. Hello Scotland. Hi, it's good to see you all. Welcome. All right, so it looks like we're good. So we've got Instagram and we've got TikTok over here, and it looks like we're connected to the. Let's see. I want to make sure. Yeah, we're connected to Facebook and YouTube and Instagram as well. Hello, hey Tammy. Hi, hey Betty. Hello. All right, so. For those of you who may not have seen my post today, what I've decided to do is every single week, what I was doing is I was doing a free live for people to ask their questions on Wednesdays and Fridays, and then right afterwards I was doing a study group regarding a book or material that we would read. And so I really enjoy the study groups. It's my opportunity to focus on spirituality, spiritual development, spiritual growth, share what I've experienced in my life, share what I've learned, share all the things that have helped me to move forward and to be able to live in the moment and to be here and to just be willing to love and care and connect with humanity despite the challenges, despite the things that we face amongst ourselves. So I decided that I wanted to begin to do a lecture series or a weekly sermon. And I thought, what better day to do that than on a Sunday, because everyone's already, if people attend church, they're already in that mood on Sunday. But for people who don't go to church, who may just be spiritual or open-minded and would like to engage in that type of conversation and dialogue, that's what this is for. So every single Sunday, as consistently as I can keep up with, I'm going to do a sermon. I'm going to do a sermon based on something that I've read that was inspiring to me, something that I learned in my own life that benefited my own experience, something that I have gained through my own spiritual journey. And so what I will use is I will look at the different spiritual texts, the different teachings that are available to us through, all of the historical documents. I will look for something inspiring during the week, and I will ask, God's source, I will ask for anything that can be inspiring to you. And so anything that I read, anything that I find throughout the week that can help us all on our spiritual journey, I'm going to use as a starting point. And then I will incorporate that into a lecture or sermon on Sundays. And then after that, I will give an experience from my life that helped me to understand this, and then open it up to questions. So for those of you who would like to engage with the process, I'm going to read a few things and express my own opinions, give my own story, and then I'm open to questions from you guys about the topic. So today's topic is embracing God, embracing source within you. And that's a very interesting and tricky subject matter, because for some people, especially for people who come from a predominantly Christian or very religious background, there are limitations when you hear those words. There are limitations that you're kind of conditioned to accept, that you're conditioned to believe in. And I don't believe in limitation. I believe in being as open and as receptive as you can to the divine, to source, to God. Some people may not like the conversation or discussion around the idea of God. But for myself, I have a very different understanding of what God is, and I will explain that here in a little bit. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of go into some of the information and then give my own understanding. And then if you guys have any questions about the topic or anything that is similar or associated, I'm open to those. And before we end today, I will look through some of the comments to see if you guys have any interesting questions that might help other people as well, so that way we can all learn together, right? Because we're all here together. We're on the planet together. And so the point of these lectures is to help ourselves to move forward, to evolve, to grow, to understand, so that way we can approach our lives in this world in a much more loving and compassionate and Okay, so for today's sermon, what I chose to do is I actually looked back into some of the old Gospels, and there are various Gospels out there, and specifically the Gospel that I'm going to be leaning on today is one that was shared regarding Christ or Jesus. Some people knew him as Yeshua. There are other names that he's been associated or affiliated with, but I'm choosing this gospel because it was an interesting beginning, and I would like to expand on what was already started. So in the Gospel of Matthew, beginning I think at chapter 5, there is the Sermon on the Mount, which is Christ's beginning lectures and sermons to people in his land. A lot of people may not believe or know this, but he actually spent a lot of time in his life studying abroad. He traveled to different regions, areas. There's stories of him with the Buddhist monasteries. There are stories of him in India. There are stories of him in the Egyptian mystery schools. So there are stories of his evolution when he was missing from the traditional Bible stories during his Middle Ages, so during his youth. So he spent a lot of time studying and learning and growing and evolving and understanding things because he felt it inside, he felt it within himself. But sometimes when you feel something and there isn't a explanation, you need to understand. You need to seek it out. You need to desire to know and understand it from more of a conceptual or ideological form. So he spent some time studying abroad, and after he spent several years away from his homeland, then he came back and said, you know what, I'm going to teach everybody what I learned because I think they need to know this. I think they need to understand what I understand. And so I'm going to start with that, and then I'll kind of go into more of it, okay? All right, so chapter 5, and this is part of the, this is within the Gospel of Matthew. And again, there are various versions of this out there. I tried to find one that I thought was within integrity of the language and of the beliefs and ideas of the time, because sometimes you can take words and you can translate them, but people 2,000 years later are going to understand those words very differently from people who might have lived during the period when they were hearing those words. So I tried to stick with some books that were more within integrity of the original language that was used, because I would like to have the closest translation possible. But this is in chapter 5. So, taking note of the crowds, he climbed up the mountain, and when he had sat down, his disciples came to him. He then began to speak, and this is what he would teach them. Congratulations to the poor in spirit. Heaven's domain belongs to them. Congratulations to those who grieve. They will be consoled. Congratulations to the gentle, they will inherit the earth. Congratulations to those who hunger and thirst for justice, they will have a feast. Congratulations to the merciful, they will receive mercy. Congratulations to those with undefiled hearts, they will see God. Congratulations to those who work for peace, they will be known as God's children. Congratulations to those who have suffered persecution for the sake of justice. Heaven's domain belongs to them. Congratulations to you when they denounce you and persecute you and spread malicious gossip about you because of me. Rejoice and be glad. Your compensation is great in heaven. Recall that this is how they persecuted the prophets who preceded you. When you hear the words and you try to understand what is meant by that, without having had a awareness of the divine within all of us, without having experienced God in life, without having had moments of understanding and gaining wisdom through the engagement of these teachings, it just sounds like very basic words that are used, but there's levels of understanding within each of those teachings. And something that I've gained over many years of seeking and trying to understand is that the moment you realize that you are God in form, the moment that you realize that you are a divine being here in this physical world, the moment that you understand the truth of who you really are, and then you begin to see life from that perspective, it opens up a whole nother layer and level of comprehension and understanding. And so when you go back and you read the words of the masters, they take on a whole different spin. And it's that spiritual evolution, it is that development within yourself that is kind of a key that unlocks the true message behind words that were used, 2,000 years ago and so forth. So I've reworked those teachings so that I can kind of bring forward the meaning and depth of what was being said. And I want to share those with you now because I think that would help you understand what he was talking about or what he was trying to convey to the crowds and to all of his disciples and people who were seeking to be saved from their own human experience. So when I reworked these and kind of dug into the depth and meaning, a whole nother layer of understanding was presented. And so I'm going to share those with you now. And I will make these available online so that y'all can use these as well if you want to. So this is my interpretation of what was said. Okay. Congratulations to those of you who are questioning your faith and seeking within yourselves, for the material world offers only evidence of the divine nature which exists within you. Congratulations to those of you who know something is missing and feel a great loss from being human. Your memory of your divine nature beyond this human state awakens within you. Congratulations to those of you who observe and practice flexibility within your thinking, positions, and are open-minded. You will survive many challenges and feel a great responsibility for all others on the earth. Congratulations to those of you who are aware of what a human injustice is and desire for resolution on behalf of others. You will have many opportunities to provide resolution for humankind within your lifetime. Congratulations to those of you who practice compassion and forgiveness instead of expressing rage, anger, or avoid giving punishment. You will experience compassion and forgiveness also by the alignment of your being. Congratulations to those of you who have not forgotten your humanity or value the experience of compassion and love. You will experience and know the presence of God's source in this physical world through synchronicities and by the acts of other humans. Congratulations to those of you who work for peace and cooperation amongst our humankind. You honor the God consciousness that connects and exists within us all, for we truly are one family. Congratulations to those of you who have suffered at the hands of other humans when you work to serve all of humanity. You are God being in form and will experience divine awareness and know the greatest expressions of love beyond this physical existence. Congratulations to those of you when people call you evil, unworthy, or undeserving of existence and act against you through actions and gossip because of your spiritual beliefs and lifestyle. You have not been abandoned. God has not turned away from you. And understand this: your life experiences serve your soul's purpose and development. Whether you realize it or not, you are honoring your existence as the experiencing physical form of Source in this world. Your challenges will allow you to experience even more loving being, and you will see all of the benefits you've gained when you are no longer attached to your earthly mind. Remember also that this is how fearful, hateful, and ignorant people have persecuted humans who are prophets and exemplify the deepest forms of the God consciousness in this world. So it totally shifts the trajectory of the teachings, because these are very, very evolved and spiritual teachings. But in that time and during those periods when the original words were used based on the translations, a lot of people used words to share knowledge. Not many knew how to read or write. And so there were very, very, very simple ways of understanding things. And so people who spent time going to study at the Forum in Alexandria, for example, which is one of the greatest storehouses of knowledge that existed during that time, which apparently Jesus may have spent some time there as well. So most people do not understand that during that period, in that time, knowledge was an achievement, and not everyone had the ability to attend a scholastic environment, to go to a school or to learn from people who were very wise. Only people who either were connected or who came from families with money, or who were of prominence, could study and could understand. So when he traveled around during that period, and learned all of these great spiritual wisdoms and teachings, and then came back, he had to essentially dumb it down. Not because people were not intelligent enough to grasp his information, but because how they understood things usually happened through very simple and basic ways of understanding. And so he had to simplify his message. He had to reduce the context so that they could grasp the basics, just the basics. But when you start to look and dig and really just dissect the teaching, it reveals this whole nother layer of understanding about our place in this world and what he was trying to inform and help others understand, and what most of us through experience or through hardship have gained through our own experience. The reason why I titled this sermon embracing or to accept God or source within yourself is because I truly do believe, based on the teachings, but also based on my experience, that we are all representatives of source in this form. We are a God in living form. We are witnesses to creation. There is no separation. Just because God existed, and people believe that God exists as this old man on a throne in a heavenly plane, doesn't mean that that is actually what God is. That is an interpretation of the divine. When you begin to have a personal relationship with God, when you actually embrace the experience of God and allow yourself to have it, you start to see it from a grander perspective. And these limiting ideas and beliefs that we are taught in traditional religion, in the Catholic Church and the Christian Church, and in other religious practices as well, they're just they're too simple. They're not evolved enough beliefs that help to really creator of creation. And so you have to give yourself permission to have this personal one-on-one relationship with the divine. You don't need anyone to have that relationship. There is no authority in this world that has more ability to tell you how you should create, how you should have a relationship with source being. When I was younger, I went through a lot in my life, and I'm very open about all of the things that I experienced in my youth. I didn't grow up with a father. I was raised by a single mother. My father didn't want to have anything to do with me because he was married with children, and he didn't want my existence to interfere with his life. And so he just had nothing to do with me. So my mother raised me on her own. And being raised by my mother, and then really being surrounded by mostly women in my life, I was more open and more aligned to sensitivity. I was more aligned to an emotional flexibility of connecting with people, connecting with humans, connecting with emotional experiences of others. And growing up, I was a sensitive child, and I don't shy away from who I am or what I am in this world. I'm a gay man. And I realized this when I was much younger. But before I realized it, I was just a sensitive sissy. I was a person that didn't qualify to be considered a male. And the fact that I was different and that I was sensitive and that I was more connected to emotions made me a target for a lot of people. And I grew up being bullied and teased. And I was bullied and teased and really just put through it by my own family members, my own cousins, especially male cousins, who are very much connected to that toxic masculinity. Because in the Hispanic culture, unless you're a really macho masculine guy, you're not a man. So I was shunned by my cousins in school. I was constantly teased, and people had nothing but content for me. And I wasn't a troublemaking child. I just existed. I existed, and I represented something that people couldn't accept. as I started to grow and evolve, I went through other challenges and issues. I was sexually molested by family members and by people that I trusted. I was physically abused. My stepfather, the man whom my mother married, he was an awful person who took out his anger and expressed his fear through physical action and through violence. So I went through a lot of these experiences, and on top of that, having sisters that I didn't get a chance to grow up with, and then my mother, who at some point in my life, she had a psychotic breakdown and was hospitalized and institutionalized for some time. So I didn't understand a lot of things growing up as to the whys. Why is this happening? Why is that happening? Why am I going through this? Why are other children not having to go through this? Why are other children being treated like human beings? Why are other people treating, these other individuals who fit within these accepted categories, accepted behaviors, accepted types? Why are they not being treated the way that I am? And I wasn't a fighter. I didn't fight back. I didn't stand up for myself. I didn't know how. I was only conditioned to be a victim. And so I remained that victim mindset for many, many years in my youth. And so as I began to get older and older, and I started to question, I was raised Catholic. So I was raised in Catholic. I went to catechism. I got my first communion. But I questioned everything, because even within the church, I was not accepted. And I mean, one of the people who molested me, who sexually, took advantage of me, was a pastor at a church. So through my own experiences, it forced me to question everything in my life. And I couldn't accept why these things were happening to me and why I was going through these things. If I go to church and they say that we're supposed to treat each other a certain way, why am I not being treated this way by the people who are saying this? If I'm supposed to be a child of God, why am I being treated like I don't deserve to exist? As I got older, and then I started to have my spiritual awakening in conjunction with my sexual awakening, which happened at puberty. And once I hit puberty, then, all of the hormones start to rage. You start to find yourself drawn or attracted to people. And though I was raised, as a straight male growing up, and I had girlfriends growing up as well, but something was changing within me, and I was attracted to males, and I was aroused and drawn to males in a different way than with women. And I didn't understand what that was. And even within school, people would mock me, people would tease me, they would call me by names, any name that they could think of, they would call me by. And I didn't understand that. I didn't even understand what those names meant, other than I was just weak or effeminate or not good enough. In one way or another, the words that were used were saying, you're not good enough, we don't accept you, you don't deserve to exist. So I couldn't accept that, because there was something with that when I saw myself in the mirror, when I thought of myself, when I was aware of myself. I knew myself not to be an evil being or a horrible human, being. I didn't act out in ways that caused other people to suffer. I didn't try to hurt other people. I didn't even try to think of hurting other people. I just wanted people to stop and to just love me. That's all I wanted, just love. And all I could sustain in my life, all I could sustain within myself was love. And so that part of me within me that was based in love, based in the desire for connection from all others, felt something was off, something was wrong, something wasn't right. And the world was not reflecting what I was being taught in the church. My experience was not reflecting what I was told would be my experience. So I had to question everything. I had no choice. I had to question everything. And I was unwilling to betray myself. I was unwilling to not be who I was, because that's all I had. That's all that was solid and a constant in my life. So I began to question, and I began to read many books, trying to understand who I was, what was my place here in this world, and what did I have to offer. And could it be possible that I am not evil, that I am not bad, that I deserve to exist, that I deserve love? Could it be possible that that is the case? Could it be possible that maybe what people believe or think about God may not exactly be 100% as accurate as they would prefer to believe? And when I began to question, that is when everything changed. Because in the questioning of my faith, in the questioning of what I was taught, I began to have a real relationship with God, a relationship that wasn't based in conditioned ideas, in philosophies that I didn't even grasp. It wasn't based in what someone else believed to be the right versus the wrong. Anything beyond that was the right. So I questioned. And in the process of questioning, I really started to dig deep within myself and find a way to know God as myself, as who I was. And in the process, began to learn to accept who I was, began to learn to accept who I'm supposed to be in this world. That was a turning point, and that shifted everything else in my life. Because the moment I began to accept God, not to embrace what I was taught, not to embrace the conditioning of the church, but once I began to embrace God as the experience of what truly is, that is when everything started to be revealed. And I started to have experiences that proved to me that I was more than just this physical body, and that I was capable of so much more than what we usually believe we're capable of. And abilities began to manifest. I began to see the future, and I began to receive information that turned out to be prophetic. Some of that, the very first real experience, saved my life. I could have burned in a fire with no way out, and I was saved because I accepted my connection to God as myself, as who I am. And so that is when it changed. And those experiences were so much more validating. They proved so much more to me without a shadow of a doubt than what I was given in the church. And I continued that path. I continued that route, and I didn't stop. And to this day, I question everything. I even question myself sometimes. I question some of my beliefs and some of my ideas, some of my positions on things. Because if you don't have the capacity to question yourself, then you don't have the capacity to grow or change. And if you can grow or change, it starts with just questioning what you believe or where you're starting from. So it's okay to question your faith. In fact, I don't think that you can have a strong faith without going through a period of questioning. That is one of the things that is required for true faith to reveal itself. Some people believe, faith means, if I just trust in the power of Jesus Christ, or if I trust in He is my Savior. I'm like, you're limiting your experience. You're limiting your divinity. You're limiting yourself by holding on to that belief, because that is simply a stand-in. That is just a representation of the deeper teaching. It is not the full depth of understanding that was given at the time it was shared. So you limit your ability to connect with the divinity, and you instead disempower yourself, and you start to tell yourself you're not as good. You are born of sin, and so you aren't worth anything. You do not deserve to exist. Your existence is an offense to God. I'm here, and I haven't ceased to exist. And in all of the questioning, and in all of the moments where I have done exactly the opposite of what has been taught in the Gospels, of what has been taught in the church, I have actually experienced more love, more compassion. I've seen it and witnessed it more so than by following the words blindly without full understanding and awareness of what they meant. So I am a huge advocate for questioning your faith and starting there. And then in the process of questioning your faith, ask God to show up. Ask God, say, who are you? What are you? How are we connected? What am I with you? What are you within me? Reveal yourself fully. Reveal yourself in my experiences. Reveal yourself in others. Demand it of the divine, demand it of God, because it is asking you to demand it. That feeling inside of yourself that does not connect with the traditional teachings of the churches, of the the religious practices, that summoning within yourself. It is asking you to step into your power, to step into your divinity, to accept the reality that you are God in witnessing form, in experiential form, here on this physical plane. And the moment you engage that and you begin to ask for more, you will receive it, and you will see it, and you will become witness to many miracles. And I know this because I have witnessed to many miracles in my life, to many things that happened that there's no way that could have happened on its own without any sort of divine alignment or intervention. And I share as often as I can with y'all what I witness, what I experience in my life. And people may say, Ferny, you have a very charmed life, or why are these little things happening in your life? They're not happening in mine. Why are you having all of these synchronicities? Why does it feel like the universe is working with you, is helping you, is serving you? And I'm like, no, it's not. It's not that the universe is helping me or serving me or doing for me. It is that I am willing to engage with that part of myself that is God, and I am willing to accept what is given, what is granted, and I'm willing to go with it and go with that flow and go along for the ride. And in the process of going along with it, you align to God consciousness, you align to the divinity within yourself, and then you will start to become a branch of the tree of knowledge and wisdom of Source, and you will see things happen in your life that you did not think were possible. A lot of people, and this brings up, some of the ideas around manifestation, law of attraction, synchronicity, alignment, all of that, which is all part of the creative process. It's all part of the manifestational process. People say, oh God, life is an accident. Everything's an accident. Everything's chaotic. And what I believe is, there has to be a coordinated, chaotic effort to bring forth some of the incredible things that exist within creation. So I believe that everything is working for itself, even when we are not aligned. People who find themselves falling into paths of fear, paths of anger, rage, hatred, all of us, because we are all human. We all suffer the same human experience, but we are all capable of the same divine expression in this form. So when you think about that, and when you begin to realize that a lot of people in this world, they're very, very much in that amnesia state. They've forgotten who they are. They're caught up in the hustle and bustle of everyday life. They're caught up in, how am I going to pay my bills today? That is my focus for the day. How am I going to have this relationship? How am I going to make this relationship work for me? How am I going to have true love? How am I going to meet my soulmate? How am I going to have a child? How am I going to avoid my mother-in-law? We think about these very human experiences. And when that occupies a majority of our mind, a majority of our energy, then it becomes our state of being. And we reside on that level of experience. We only exist there. But we are more than just the physical form. We are God consciousness in form, in human perspective. And so if you begin to question and you begin to seek past what is the basic level of suffering, you will reconnect and reawaken and remember who you really are. But there are a lot of people in this world who don't know this, don't understand this. They're not awakened, and that's okay. That is their path. That is their journey. It would be wonderful for all of us to be on the same page, but we are all not on the same page. Some of us grasp this truth, this authentic nature. Some of us grasp this very differently from others. Some of us only choose to live on those surface planes. Some of us do not question. We align with what is given, and we submit. We become the soldier of information. We become the obedient one. And we do that with our brothers and sisters on this planet. We do this with each other. We allow ourselves to be disempowered and accept what others have given us because they are the authority. But we are the ultimate authority when it comes to our relationship with God. Neither the church, nor the highest priest, nor the highest spiritual body in this world has more authority over your choices, over your engagement, over your experience of the divine, of God, of Source. No one. And the moment you accept that, the moment you allow yourself to be at peace with that, then you begin to resume your power. You step back into your throne. You reawaken in ways that start with just very subtle shifts and changes and then become more and more and more. A lot of people ask me, how can I be more spiritual? How can I, evolve spiritually? And I'm like, well, start by just questioning your relationship with the universe, with God, with yourself. Start there and ask for the truth. Ask for it, because when you ask for the truth, it show up in 1,000 and a million different ways in your life, and you can't negate it. You can't go against it. You can't dispute it, because it is consistent. And that's what I trust. I trust the consistency of creation showing me itself. I trust that. I don't trust as easily the words of another human, because all that comes through them is reduced by their perspective, by their lifetime, by their individuality. Doesn't mean that it doesn't hold no value. It doesn't mean that there isn't any depth to it, or that they can't teach me something. It just means that it is still limited by this one. But there, when you think of Source and of God, it is this all-in-one package that is represented by the individuals we all are, but it's an all-in-one package. And so you can take the words of one who puts themselves into a position of authority and says, I am the authority in this world. You have religious organizations, you have people walking around in this world acting as if it's either their way or the highway, and the highway of death, the highway of non-existence, the highway of suffering. And in doing so, they turn their backs on God themselves, because they have immediately and instantaneously separated themselves from the creation, because we all exist. If we weren't meant to exist, we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't exist. We all exist. We all deserve to be here. And the moment that you negate any part of the creation, you turn your back on the creation and its creator, and you turn your back on yourself in the moment. So this is why it's so important that even when we have differences amongst ourselves, even when we see things very differently or understand things very differently, my life experience may be different from another person's life experience. But regardless, those experiences should allow us the opportunity to connect more with each other, not to negate each other's ability or negate each other's desire to be. Negate each other's right to be. And that's important. So we won't always get along. We won't always agree. We won't always see things eye to eye, because we all are individuals. We're individuations of the divine, but we are very much confined within the experiences of our life, within the perspective that we hold. But if we can try to reach out to connect with each other, if we can try to understand each other from the human perspective, which is what Christ talked about, if it is you who see the divine in each other, it is you who embrace love and compassion, because love and compassion are uniting forces in reality, in our experience, in the universe, in creation. Compassion, love, cooperation, they unite us. Fear, anger, hatred, they separate us. And when you get so caught up in the world and everything that is happening every day, and in all of our individual superficial experiences, then we become victims. We become submissive to the experience of fear, to the experience of hatred, to the experience of anger. And people who are afraid, who are angry, who are really just caught up in that, their only understanding of changing that, of reducing that experience for themselves, is not by embracing love, compassion, cooperation. It's by embracing control. How can I control the fear? How can I control the hatred? How can I control the lack? How can I control and reduce that, instead of embracing the thing that is not those things? And that's the trick. That's the magical solution. So when you're dealing with people in this world and they have nothing but bad things to say to you or about you. I'm not saying you shouldn't defend yourself. I'm not saying that you shouldn't act in favor of yourself and express yourself in a way that reflects the integrity of your relationship with the divine, the integrity of the fact that you are divine being in form. I'm not saying you shouldn't defend that or that you shouldn't express that fully in your response and your reactions. But when you spend more time focused on defending, more time focused on engaging with that energy, it becomes a part of who you are. It becomes a part of your nature. By embracing fear, by embracing hatred, by embracing ignorance and acting out of control, the need to control, you also become that which you engage most often with. So it's important to know where your energy is going to go and where you want to focus your time and yourself in your life on a regular basis, on a daily basis. And if you just remember, even just once a week, which is why Sundays are so important, once a week, just remembering that you are divine in form, that you have God within you, that you are the authority in your life, then you will have an incredible experience that validates and affirms the consciousness of God within this reality, within creation, and within yourself. And you will see miraculous things that you did not possibly conceive were possible. Okay? Let's look at questions here, because I want to look at some of the questions that you guys are asking here. Yeah, people ask me if I'm a Gnostic. I'm not. I think keeping myself open to just knowledge and information is important because it doesn't limit what I will do or what I will experience or what I will see. It won't limit that. So I try to keep myself as open as possible. That way that I can receive more, know more, have more of an experience. So it is one path of study that I've gone down, but I don't technically consider myself a Gnostic. But some of my beliefs, a lot of people would say that are very very Gnostic in nature. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, it's, when people go through crisis in life, when people go through very challenging circumstances, when you suffer and endure such suffering in your life, there are two ways to respond. There are two ways to react. For myself, my faith, my spirituality saved me. It saved me from continuing to endure and suffer. And it wasn't until I began to accept who I was and to allow myself to become empowered that I realized that some of those experiences did serve me, do still serve me. I am able to use all of that in some way, shape, or form. Many times when I am working with clients, when I'm working with people, there's something they're going through, and they're on one side of the door, and I know where they are because I've been there, and I've been able to get to the other side of that doorway. And so I give them just any information, any understanding that I gained, anything that may have worked for me. I grant them that. I give them that because they need to get back, they need to get on this side with me. Because once you get onto the other side, it's a whole nother ball game, and what you have experienced you can use to your advantage, to the advantage of all others. It isn't just for you. Our pain, our suffering isn't just for us. It is for God. It is because the source is trying to experience through the individuations of human form, through all of the different forms of consciousness. And so when we experience, it isn't just we as an individual who are experiencing, but we as source in form, as the witnessing aspect of God. It's so important to not allow the fear or the hatred or the anger, the resentment. It's so important to not let that overtake you for too long. We're all human. When we go through something difficult, we will have a human response, a human reaction. That's allowed. You're allowed to be human in this form. It's why we're here. But once you have that immediate emotional reaction, once you have those responses that are quite normal, then you can take a look at that in a different way. You can pull yourself back and try to hold some sort of objectivity. And the objectivity is based in love and compassion and wisdom and teachings that you may have been given growing up, or that you may have learned from one person or from an organization or a religious practice. But you take a look at what you went through, and you look at it from a completely different vantage point, and you try to understand it and what purpose it served. How did it help you? How did it aid you in your life? And that's the trick. That's the key to taking suffering experiences. We're all going to suffer in this world. We cannot escape it. This is a factor that is indisputable. We all will suffer in this world, and none of us can do anything to escape it. But you can help yourself to align to less suffering. You can help yourself to connect with experiences that do not give such suffering, do not allow you to experience such suffering. And so you can change the amount of suffering you will have in this world. You don't have to suffer every day and endure, great struggle. You can shift it and reduce it so that you can focus and appreciate and embrace the magic and the love of this world. So I think that's the important part. And when we are going through such traumatic experiences, growing up or as children or as adults, immediately we can fall into the conditioned victimization of that experience, of the anger, the rage, or we can change it because we choose to be different. We choose to be something else. We choose to operate from a divine form, a divine mind, versus the human suffering state. And so there's a choice that's made in that. Your human experience, your human suffering is not a choice. The amount of it is, and how that suffering will affect you and refine you and develop you in this world, that's a choice as well. So the experience of suffering is not a choice, but how much suffering you will engage with and accept is a choice. And what you use that suffering experience for is a choice. That's where people get into trouble, because you have people who use it for good, to do good things in this world, to serve humanity, to serve ourselves, or they use it to control, to avoid, to dominate, to restrict whatever they can in that suffering. And that's where you get into trouble, because that all leads to obsession with money, obsession with sex, obsession with people, obsession with control or dominance or power. It leads to these forms of obsessions. It leads to addictions. It leads to a lack of awareness of source, and more of an awareness of suffering, more of a desire to want to control that, to dominate that, to win over it. And that only takes you into the lower vibratory states, the lower levels of consciousness. Yeah. Um, Cassidy says, I agree. Always be mindful of who and what you spend your energy on because you'll get more of it. Being conscious, being aware is something that we have to practice. We have to practice being conscious and aware. It's not good enough to just show up on a Sunday and just listen to the words and then go back into your life as if what you just heard had no bearing on it. That is not true practice of spiritual being. That is not a true practice of acknowledging and honoring God and the source within you. That is not exemplifying the messages or the teachings. That isn't enough. You have to do it as often as possible. Every time you have an opportunity to show love instead of anger, take advantage of that opportunity, because that one moment might grant you access to more of it, to more compassion, not just in the ability to express it, to show it, but in the ability to experience it, for people to show you love, to grant you love. It wasn't until I just stopped seeking love from people, stopped desiring love from others, and I just opened myself up to just receiving love however it came, and gave myself love, not through superficial means or through positive words, just acknowledge that I deserve to live, I am a loving being, and that I am an honored divine form of source, of God. Once I accepted that and embraced that, and once I realized I was worthy of the connection with source, with God, I was worthy of embracing and of engaging directly. I was worthy of receiving prophetic knowledge from the divine. I was worthy of, and I choose to accept that. The moment you do that, you start to receive love in so many ways. Love just starts coming all over the place. You start to have it show up in every opportunity that it can be possible. And that's the incredible thing, is the more you just accept these things, the more you accept a loving God, a loving form of expressing in this world, you begin to experience that. Now, granted, all things are of God, all things are of source, all things are of creation. This includes the lower vibratory states. This includes the darkness that is beyond the light. This includes all of those things, but those are tools. The darkness is not a everlasting place of damnation. The darkness is a tool that allows you to experience and to appreciate and to embrace the light. That is all that it is. And so if you empower the darkness as if it is a being, as if it has power over you, as if you have to avoid it at all costs, then you disempower yourself. You disempower your nature. You forget who you are. So the darkness is just a tool. It serves us as a reminder of who we are through contrasting experiences, through experiences that are not enjoyable, that are painful, that are based in suffering. But it grants us an understanding, it grants us awareness, it grants us wisdom, and it grants us the opportunity to connect with each other. And it is when we connect with each other that we realize the loving form of God in each other, in ourselves, and as one. Yeah, I think a lot of people, and it's a crowning crow says, some are afraid of giving themselves permission to open the door and cross the threshold because they believe they are going to lose something or someone in the process of doing so. In my work as a professional psychic and medium, the moment, I've met a lot of people who have these awakenings happening as well, and they are experiencing things that are very much affirming of what they're capable of, affirming of what I can do. What I can do, you can do also. I've only seen it over and over and over again. And their fear, because of what they were taught in the church, their fear because they feel they're going to lose control, their fear because they don't want to engage with a Satan or with the devil, etc., keeps them from understanding, keeps them from and realizing their full potential. And it isn't until you realize that full potential that you start to really experience God and really start to experience source and form. And, for those people who may not understand, some of these stories and these characters that you find in the Bible, like Satan, like the devil, they're translations of words based in symbology, based in ideology. And a lot of the stories, a lot of the ideology, the philosophies in the Old Testament and these stories of a Satan and all of that is based in older religious practices like Zoroastrianism, which is another one that it's another religious organization and practice and belief system that has the idea of a heaven and hell, of good versus evil, this dualistic nature of reality. That is where a lot of this comes from. It was all there before it showed up in the Old Testament in some of the books of the Jewish people. So a lot of that information is just recycled information from past ideas, from past beliefs, from past stories. And the original idea, the original meaning of Satan or of the devil is simply adversary, or someone who stands against you in the position that they hold. So if I am in a courtroom and I am in one side defending myself and you have someone on the other side who is speaking against me, they are considered the Satan. They are considered the devil. So the idea was never really about evil or about bad. It was about adversary, someone who opposes you, someone who is in a different mental perspective. And so that's what it was about. And it was actually focused on the idea of a human occupying that, or an experience in your life representing that. And so then over time, because of the mythology and the ideology and just the enforcement of these beliefs, it became a character in a book. And so a lot of people believe in a very physical character that they call Satan or they call the devil. But it's just a representation of an idea. It's just a representation of something symbolically that was meant in a very different way when it originated back in Zoroastrianism and some of the older faiths. So when you read stories in the Bible today in the translations, especially in the Catholic and the Christian churches, Satan is very much a person. It's a person and not a representation of the opposing, a representation of what you're faced with, a representation of what you're working against or what you're struggling with or what you're challenged by. And it's important to know these things, because when you begin to understand these things, it reveals something very different, something entirely different from what most of us were taught if we come from a Christian or a Catholic background. Mm. Hmm. So, when people read stories, it depends on which Bible you're reading, because there's countless versions and interpretations. And a lot of those books were based in information that was presented by the Apostle Paul, who is pretty much the founder of the Christian or Catholic movement. Before that, it was a Jewish movement that was supported by Jesus's brothers. So there was a lot of differences of opinion. And Paul was a Pharisee, so he had practice and come from a Jewish background, but he never really met Jesus in life. He had a dream or an experience, and then he gave himself authority over Christianity, over the faith. And so during that time, about 70 years after the crucifixion, or I'm sorry, about 70 AD, around that time frame, about 40 years after the crucifixion, there were two versions of Christianity that were emerging. There was the version that was based more on the Jewish beliefs and faith, and coming from that perspective, that was supported by the family of Christ or Jesus. Then you have, Paul, and then a bunch of other people, some of the other apostles, but you have these people who didn't actually know Jesus in life. They only experienced them after the fact and through maybe the teachings that were passed on through word of mouth, that they began to say, I know the true Christ. I know who Christ is. And you see this every day. You see churches popping up with people who they call themselves pastors and they call themselves the authority. And they know the true form, negating anybody else's perspective or opinion. And then they continue to teach and teach and teach, and they form a congregation. And at some point you have a whole movement. You have an entire group of people who believe that one way of Christianity, of the form of Christianity. And so Paul kind of did his own thing and just pretty much started the Christian movement without that process, without Jesus being a part of that process. And in fact, there was a lot of arguments and a lot of infighting within the Christian communities, because most of the information was spread by word of mouth. So you can take a really different way when it's passed on to someone else. And the family of Jesus was opposing Paul and his ministries because they felt he did not reflect Jesus in his life and what he was actually talking about. He was instead spinning a lot of that information because he was trying to form a congregation within the Greek community, the Greek-speaking communities. Within the Roman jurisdiction, even though most of the information, most of the sayings, most of it was spoken in Aramaic or in a different language, different script, but most of the Bibles that you see today are based in this Pauline philosophy, in this tradition of Paul's ideas about what he thought Christ was teaching or who he thought Christ was. And so if you look at the Gospels, which we all know of the four main Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Mark being considered the earliest because it is the one that is more stripped down, then you have Matthew, then you have some of the others. They kind of evolved, and there was a strong tradition within Greek philosophical circles to exaggerate, to speak in a very poetic, in a very educated fashion. But the words being spoken originally were not intended to be understood by educated men or women. They were intended to be understood by the layperson, by the individual who was, cleaning up the feces of horses, who were slaves for the Greek people. So these were intended for people who were really connected to the experience of suffering. But ultimately, because there was such depth and profound philosophy within the teachings, it drew in people of all walks of life, and it drew in the educated person. It drew in people who had standing. And so in order to accommodate those individuals, in order to accommodate the demographics, as you will, Paul took it upon himself to kind of rework it and spin it in a way that would serve those populations, those demographics. And so that ultimately won out and became what we all know to be the Christian faith. And the New Testament, the Gospels as we know them, most of the translations that exist are based on Paul's philosophies, on Paul's ideas. And there were many, many books, many texts that were circulating. And it wasn't until one of the first bishops, I think it was Athanasius, who a few years, I want to say it was about 300, 400 years later, said, these are the books we need to focus on. These are the texts. These are the authoritative doctrines we must go by. And this was around the time of the Council of Nicaea and during the period when people were coming together. Constantine was bringing forward all of the leaders of the individual circles of Christianity. All of the leaders were coming together to try to figure some things out and to try to kind of come together because it was an emerging religion. And there was a lot of information and there was a lot of conflicting information. And so you had some circles saying one thing and claiming that they knew directly from Christ or from Jesus what was being said. Then you have other circles who were claiming other things. And there was a lot of conflicting information. And so you have Athanasius, who went on and said, these are the books, these are the things we're going to use. He wrote a letter, sent it out to everybody. And after that, that's when you have, pretty much doctrine. And the precedence of doctrine. So even though people would think that it happened at the Council of Nicaea, they were just going back and forth trying to discuss and figure out some things and trying to work with Constantine, who was realizing that his own faith, Constantine, who believed in a completely different religious belief system, he realized that Christianity was starting to win out. There was more influence, there was more control, there was more of that happening, and then he decided to just roll with it. And then he incorporated a lot of the traditional dates, a lot of the traditional beliefs, a lot of some of the ideas that we hold today. He rolled it in with his own religious beliefs, and so that became the new form of Christianity over that century. So it's a really complex. You have other versions, and then people infighting again, which has always been the case. When people try to act as the authority for God in this world, negating all other forms of authority, all other humans, all other beings, it becomes a battle within fear, within ignorance, within hatred. All of that becomes the trend. And so at that point, you start to lose God. You start to lose the source of the teachings. You start to lose a lot of that, and you start to roll in human dogma, human ignorance, human fear, human hatred, human control. And that becomes a part of the belief system. That becomes a part of the basis of why we practice Christianity, or why we practice Catholicism the way we do today. So it's very complex, but when you go back and you really seek and find and try to look at some of the original teachings and try to find the earliest sources with the best translations, you start to see things very differently. You start to understand things very differently. That doesn't mean that those are the true sources either, because some of these sources were still within 100 years of the crucifixion, but it's not like they were written by. So some of these sources are still word of mouth. They're still teachings that were passed on over decades. So it gets complicated, and you have to ultimately decide: are you going to go by what is written in a book, or are you going to go by what is based in your being? And if you just focus on that, and if you trust that, you will start to see consistency with the creator in the creation. You will start to realize what in the book lines up with the reality of creation and what doesn't, what is definitely a part of the human experience and was based in human dogma, in fear, in anger, control, hatred. So I love you all. This has been absolutely amazing. I am so happy with this very first sermon, and so glad that I was able to connect with all of y'all. I am going to make this available online. I'm also going to repost, and then I will also share this on my website. So you can always go to fernandomarone.com, and it'll be in a section that is going to be devoted to sermons. And so that way we can come together every Sunday. We can remember who we are. We can teach each other and help each other through in the physical form. I love you all, and I will see y'all next Sunday. Okay? Bye, everybody.